The tea is scalding, and this time it's all about Kody Brown. The man who once called himself the patriarch of reality TV's most unconventional family has finally hit a breaking point, and it happened right in front of the cameras. Crew members have whispered about difficult shoots before, but what went down this time forced even hardened TLC staffers to intervene. We're talking about on-set meltdowns, disappearing acts, explosive shouting matches, and a production team scrambling to control a situation that was rapidly spinning out of hand. For years, Kody has presented himself as a man of faith, discipline, and control, the leader of a sprawling polygamous family navigating fame and chaos. But behind that polished confession camera smile, the cracks were growing deeper. Cast members, insiders, even TLC crew have started describing the same story, a man unraveling in slow motion. It started innocently enough, a long day of filming, a tense family dinner scene. Producers were pushing for authenticity, but what they got was something they never expected, Kody completely losing grip on his emotions. One cameraman later said off record, "You could feel the tension before he even opened his mouth." Everyone knew something was about to blow. At first, Kody tried to keep up appearances. He spoke slowly, breathing through gritted teeth, eyes fixed on Robin across the table. But when one of the producers asked him to clarify his feelings for a follow-up shot, something inside him seemed to snap. He slammed his hands on the table so hard that the sound echoed through the set microphones. Plates rattled. A boom operator flinched. Even Robin froze. The footage that made it to air was mild compared to what happened next. Off camera, though still recorded, Kody shouted about betrayal, hypocrisy, and being set up for humiliation. He accused the showrunners of editing him to look like a monster, and for once, no one could calm him down. Janelle had already walked off earlier that day, and Christine wasn't even on set. Robin tried to reach out, but he pulled away, muttering something about everyone being against him. Within minutes, production halted. The director called for a break, crew whispered in hallways, and two senior producers met privately to discuss whether to keep rolling. They decided to document everything, even the breakdown, because this was reality TV at its rawest. What they didn't expect was that Kody would turn on them next. As lights dimmed and the microphones stayed live, Kody reportedly stormed through the set, tearing off his mic pack and shouting at a producer, "You think you can edit my life? You think you know me?" By the time security and crew intervened, the damage was done. Kody's collapse wasn't just emotional, it was symbolic. The man who built his brand on control had just shown the world how completely he'd lost it. Behind the polished scenes of Sister Wives, few people realized just how fragile the filming process had become. According to crew members who've since left TLC, Kody's breakdown wasn't an isolated moment, it was the culmination of years of suppressed anger, fatigue, and pride colliding in one long, unforgettable night. Multiple sources, including production assistants and sound engineers, later described what it felt like to watch Kody unravel in real time. One camera operator, who'd filmed the family for over a decade, said quietly in a podcast interview, "We used to joke that Kody could talk through any crisis. But this time, it wasn't words anymore, it was rage." The dinner scene that preceded the collapse was supposed to be routine, a standard family catch-up for the cameras. But tensions were high from the moment Robin entered the room. Janelle had already refused to sit next to Kody, and Christine's name kept coming up in small talk, each mention sharpening the tension like a knife. Then came the question that changed everything. A producer, trying to provoke a little dialogue, asked, "Kody, do you ever feel responsible for how things turned out?" The silence that followed was excruciating. Kody's jaw tightened, and the crew could see it, his eyes glassed over with that mixture of fury and humiliation that only comes when someone who's lost control still wants to appear powerful. "Responsible," he repeated, voice cracking slightly. "Responsible for people quitting on me? For disloyalty? You want me to take the blame for that?" According to one sound technician, the next 10 minutes were chaos. Kody stood up, ripped off his microphone, and started pacing. He accused the network of ambushing him, of editing his life to fit a villain narrative. "You don't care about truth," he shouted at one point, "you just want the downfall." It wasn't the words that stunned everyone, it was the way he said them. Each syllable hit with the weight of years of bottled resentment. Crew members, trained to stay neutral, suddenly found themselves exchanging worried glances. One assistant producer whispered, "Do we keep rolling?" Another shook her head. "Not like this." Then, something unexpected happened. Kody's anger broke, not into more rage, but into silence. He sat down, breathing heavily, eyes fixed on the floor. For a long stretch of time, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the lighting rigs. And then, quietly, almost like a confession, Kody said, "You know what the real problem is? I don't even recognize myself anymore." That was when TLC made the call to stop filming for the night. But the cameras were still running. Every producer, every crew member knew, this footage would never see the light of day. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a man breaking down under the weight of his own mythology. Later, one insider summed it up perfectly: Kody's collapse wasn't about the wives leaving. It was about his image collapsing. The character he'd built for television couldn't survive the real man underneath. The footage that night never made it into the final cut, but those who were in the room said it was impossible to forget. The man they'd filmed for over a decade, the same man who'd once strutted into interviews with confidence and charm, now looked like a hollow version of himself. The veins on his temples pulsed with stress, his hands trembled, and his words slurred as if he was fighting to keep his composure. Production had seen tense family fights before. That was, after all, the lifeblood of sister wives, but this was different. It wasn't drama for television anymore. It was a full-blown personal collapse playing out in real time. One of the assistant directors described it later to a friend: "We'd had walk-offs, shouting matches, emotional interviews, but this was the first time we had to decide whether to stop filming because we were worried about Kody's stability." TLC executives were alerted immediately. The production manager radioed in that Kody was unresponsive to direction and refusing to leave set. It wasn't just that he was angry, he was incoherent, jumping from self-defense to paranoia. "They're twisting everything," he muttered to himself repeatedly. "They're making me the villain. They always do." Meanwhile, Robin sat quietly at the far end of the table, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She tried to approach him once, but he snapped, "Don't touch me. You're part of this too." That was when the director called for a total lockdown of the set, something almost unheard of in reality television. All non-essential crew were told to step out. The sound team muted their channels. The lighting operator powered down the overheads to create a softer glow, hoping to calm the tension. But Kody wasn't calming down. He was spiraling. When producers tried to escort him to the green room for a private talk, he resisted. His voice rose again, echoing through the kitchen where they'd been filming. "You people want to see me fail," he shouted, slamming a glass on the counter. "You've been waiting for this." Crew members later said that glass wasn't thrown, but it cracked in his hand, a sharp reminder that the meltdown was physical as much as emotional. That's when one of the senior producers made the emergency call: "Cut everything. Security, get on set." The moment security entered, the tone shifted from television to triage. Kody was shaking, pacing, clutching his chest like his breath couldn't keep up. A medic on standby approached him, checking his pulse and oxygen. "I'm fine," he said, voice hoarse. "Just stop filming." But the cameras, the silent witnesses of every fracture in his family, were still rolling, capturing every flicker of denial, every tremor in his voice. Later, when the crew reviewed the footage privately, several of them cried. One, a seasoned cameraman who had filmed everything from political scandals to reality divorces, said quietly, "It didn't feel like we were documenting a man anymore. It felt like we were watching someone unravel his soul." That night, production wrapped early for the first time in years. No interviews. No confessionals. Just a single shot of Kody walking off set into the dark Arizona night, unsteady and silent. The man who once demanded total control of his family and his narrative now had neither. When dawn broke the next morning, the set looked like a battlefield that had been hastily cleaned up. Empty coffee cups, half-lit cameras, a few shards of the cracked glass wrapped in paper towels. The crew had been told to reset for a family check-in scene, but nobody believed filming would actually resume. People whispered instead about the footage, the shouting, and the call from TLC headquarters that had come through at 2 a.m. Executives were in full crisis mode. A meltdown like this could jeopardize the entire Sister Wives brand. The show was already fragile. Christine had left, Janelle was barely participating, and public sympathy for Kody had all but evaporated. One producer summed it up bluntly: "We'd built 10 years of television on Kody's image of control. Now that image had exploded on camera." That morning, a closed-door meeting was held in a rented trailer behind the house set. Present, 2 TLC lawyers, the showrunner, the director, and Kody himself, pale, silent, wearing the same shirt from the night before. They needed him calm enough to sign a release allowing any footage from the previous day to be stored, even if not aired. But when they began reading the clause about ownership of likeness, he snapped again. Ownership, he repeated. You own my family now too? The lawyers exchanged looks. Robin, sitting beside him, tried to whisper reassurance. He ignored her. For the next 45 minutes, the conversation ricocheted between negotiation and therapy. He wanted the footage destroyed, they wanted to preserve it in case of narrative continuity. Eventually, a compromise. The scene would be archived, locked under restricted access, pending executive review. It was a polite way of saying, we'll keep it forever. Meanwhile, the rest of the cast was reeling. Janelle texted producers saying she refused to film until things were handled. Christine, reached by phone, reportedly said only, now you see what I lived with. Even Robin, usually the defender, told a makeup artist she felt afraid to go home. Within 24 hours, the network had flown in a counselor, officially for cast well-being, unofficially to assess liability. The press, of course, knew nothing. TLC's PR team drafted a bland statement about a pause in production due to scheduling adjustments. But inside the studio, emails were flying. Editors had already logged the Meltdown footage as episode 12, unusable but critical reference. They couldn't air it, but they couldn't unsee it either. When the crew finally reconvened later that week, something fundamental had shifted. Kody arrived late, sunglasses on, offering brief apologies about stress and fatigue. Everyone nodded, but no one believed the storm had passed. The man who had once greeted every cameraman by name now avoided eye contact. His confidence had drained out of him, leaving a brittle, uneasy quiet. Off record, one of the senior producers admitted what everyone felt, we weren't shooting reality anymore. We were managing damage control disguised as television. That was the moment TLC realized they hadn't just captured a storyline, they'd captured the unraveling of the very character that built their franchise. The network could spin anything into ratings, but this? This was too raw, too real. And worse, it wasn't over. Because Kody Brown's collapse wasn't a single outburst. It was the beginning of a slow-motion implosion that would stretch over weeks, dragging crew, cast, and cameras into its gravity. By the time filming resumed, something unspoken hung in the air, a quiet dread that every crew member felt but no one dared name. The meltdown had changed everything. It wasn't just another tense moment between Kody and his wives, it was a rupture that split the production itself. In the weeks that followed, footage trickled into the editing suite. Hours upon hours of raw material, long silences, tense dinners, off-camera muttering. The editors, who had once joked about sister wives being marriage meets management, now found themselves watching scenes that felt more like psychological autopsies than family updates. They logged everything in detail, timestamps, emotional beats, tone shifts, but one folder drew everyone's attention, night of the collapse, restricted. Only senior staff could open it. The rest of the team was told to label it and move on. Yet curiosity burned. Rumors started spreading through post-production. One assistant editor swore she saw a clip where Kody stared directly into the camera and whispered, "You're all against me." Another said there was an off-mic argument where he accused a producer of betrayal. It was unclear how much of that footage still existed. TLC's lawyers had ordered several reels locked away in off-site storage, but everyone who saw even fragments said the same thing. It didn't look staged. It looked like a man having a genuine breakdown. Editing meetings became war rooms. How much of Kody's unraveling could they show without turning the show into a public intervention? The notes were clinical, toned-down breathing audio. Crop close-up before outburst. Cut to B-roll of Robin looking away. Every decision felt like defusing a bomb. In one meeting, an editor asked bluntly, "Are we protecting him or protecting the network?" No one answered. Behind the scenes, whispers multiplied. The crew that had worked on 90 Day Fiancé and My 600 Pounds Life were quietly warning each other that sister wives might not survive another season. "It's not entertainment anymore," one insider said. "It's damage control on camera." But amid the panic, there was fascination too. Some producers believed this was raw gold, a rare glimpse into a reality star's collapse. They wanted to reframe it as a season of reckoning, perhaps even stretch the chaos into a redemption arc. One executive reportedly said, "Every hero needs a downfall before a comeback." The problem? There was no comeback in sight. Kody refused to film solo interviews for nearly 2 weeks. When he finally did, the footage was haunting. He sat stiffly, avoiding the lens, speaking in circles. "People think I'm the problem," he said softly. "They don't see the lies, the manipulation, the setup." Then a pause. "But maybe I've let this get away from me." The editors marked that as scene 42, moment of clarity. It was powerful but painful, a man defending himself while realizing he might be the architect of his own downfall. Late one night, an exhausted sound tech uploaded the week's reels and added a note at the bottom of the log: "This doesn't feel like a TV show anymore. It feels like a confession none of us asked for." That note was quietly deleted from the system the next morning. But the sentiment lingered across the team. TLC had built an empire on human drama, but now they were staring at something different, something raw, messy, and real enough to scare even the people who lived off conflict. Kody's collapse had become more than an episode. It was a question no one wanted to answer. How far is too far when real life stops being television? When the network finally convinced the wives to resume filming, the tension was visible even before the cameras rolled. Everyone knew what had happened, no one knew how much would ever be shown. The set was eerily quiet, the usual chatter replaced by whispered questions. "Did you see him last week? Is he okay?" Janelle was the first to sit for interview. She didn't raise her voice, but every sentence landed like a hammer. "I've seen Kody angry. I've seen him proud. But that night, that wasn't either. That was fear pretending to be strength." Her eyes watered, though she kept the same calm tone she'd always used in the confessionals. She described how, moments before the outburst, he'd squeezed his fists until his knuckles whitened. He kept whispering that everyone was ganging up on him. "We weren't. We were just tired of being edited into villains." Christine's turn came next. She refused makeup, telling the stylist, "I want to look like I feel." When the lights came up, she didn't waste a second. Kody's collapse didn't start that night. It started years ago, when he stopped listening. You can only lead if you love, and he forgot that. She told stories that never made it on air, late-night texts begging for space, production meetings where she'd cried off camera, the quiet way she'd started packing long before the official breakup. The editors later marked her session as too honest for syndication. Robin's interview was the hardest to schedule. She'd been silent since the breakdown, speaking only to producers through a handler. When she finally appeared, wearing black and gripping a tissue, her voice trembled. "Everyone blames me. They say I made him worse. Maybe I did. Maybe we both believed the show more than our marriage." The room went still. Even the camera operators froze. Robin wiped her eyes and added, "When he shouted that night, I didn't see a husband or a father. I saw a man begging not to disappear." TLC's legal team later debated cutting that line. It humanized him too much, they thought, but the producers kept it. It was the one sentence that explained everything: the fame, the ego, the implosion. Outside the interviews, the wives avoided one another. Janelle stayed close to crew she trusted. Christine left immediately after each scene. Robin retreated to her trailer. Yet despite their distance, they shared a strange solidarity. Each of them had been collateral damage in Kody's need to control the narrative. As for Kody, he was shown clips of the women's interviews 2 days later. Witnesses said he watched in silence, hands clasped, eyes red. When Christine's line about forgetting to love played, he whispered, "They don't understand, none of them do." Then he stood, removed his mic, and walked out again. That exit wasn't filmed. But one producer recorded it in the daily log with 6 words that summed up the state of the show: "Cast united, Kody completely alone now." What no one realized yet was that TLC planned to use every frame of it, the wives' testimonies, the offset whispers, the uncomfortable silences, to rebuild sister wives into something darker, more intimate, and far riskier than before. Because once the cast had spoken, there was no putting the story back in its cage. When executives at TLC gathered in their Maryland headquarters to review the footage, no one spoke for the first several minutes. The playback room was dark except for the glow of the monitors. On screen, Kody's collapse unfolded again, the trembling hands, the raised voice, the silence after the crash. When the clip ended, the head of programming simply exhaled and said, "We can't air that." But the marketing director had a different reaction. "This is the rawest thing we've ever caught," she said. "It's human. It's tragic. It's everything people tune in for." The debate that followed lasted hours. Legal reminded everyone of the contracts, ethics reminded them of mental health, marketing reminded them of ratings. The numbers were undeniable. Engagement on social media had spiked since the whispers about Kody's meltdown began circulating in fan groups. Every mention of collapse, rage, or on-set fight doubled traffic. TLC was sitting on a potential goldmine of attention, but also a public relations disaster waiting to happen. Finally, the showrunner proposed a compromise. The breakdown would be implied, not shown. They would reframe it as a tense confrontation, edit out the worst moments, and build an entire episode around Kody's journey through pressure and leadership. The euphemisms were almost poetic. Collapse became pressure. Rage became vulnerability. The emergency lockdown was renamed Crew Safety Protocol. To sell the edit, they needed interviews, people who could narrate Kody's unraveling without making it look like exploitation. So they turned to the cast. Christine's heartbreak, Janelle's quiet disappointment, Robin's guilt, all of it could serve as reflection and context. The wives became narrators of the very event that had broken the show. The editor's notes read, "Build tension with silence, not shouting. Cut to close-ups of faces. Let the audience feel what's missing." When the first rough cut screened internally, even the skeptics were moved. The story played like a tragedy, a man burdened by fame, misunderstood by family, lashing out and then crumbling under the weight of his own image. One executive whispered, "It's Shakespearean." But not everyone agreed. Several crew members who'd witnessed the real event were furious. "You're turning a crisis into content," one said in a leaked email. He needed help, not another storyline. Still, the machine moved forward. Trailers were cut, taglines written. The season's promo teased, "This year, everything changes." When leadership breaks, who picks up the pieces? It was brilliant marketing, vague enough to intrigue, honest enough to hook. By the time the episode aired, speculation was unstoppable. Fans dissected every frame online, convinced there was hidden footage TLC wasn't showing. They were right. Privately, the crew called it the ghost episode. 47 minutes of raw collapse locked in a vault, seen only by editors and lawyers. But its shadow stretched over every scene that followed. Inside TLC, the question no one could escape was this: how do you build entertainment out of someone's undoing, and still sleep at night? The network had made its choice. They would walk the tightrope between truth and spectacle, and hope the audience didn't notice the fall beneath. What they didn't expect was that Kody himself would notice, and start planning to take back control of his story. When TLC executives thought the chaos had finally settled, Kody Brown began working on his own version of events. Off camera, he started calling podcast hosts, influencers, even minor YouTube commentators, offering exclusive context about what had really happened that night. His story shifted from guilt to justification. "They provoked me," he insisted. "The show was edited to destroy my character." Privately, TLC's communications team called it damage mitigation by ego. Publicly, they couldn't stop him. His contract allowed personal interviews so long as he didn't reveal future storylines. Within weeks, clips of Kody's new narrative began circulating online. He painted himself as a misunderstood father trying to protect his privacy from a manipulative network. It was textbook counterspin, deflection laced with confession. One entertainment reporter described the first of these interviews as equal parts therapy session and press conference. Kody leaned into the camera, eyes glistening, saying, "If people saw everything, they'd know I was the one being pushed." He tapped his chest for emphasis. They need villains to sell ads. Behind the scenes, TLC panicked. Every time Kody spoke, he validated rumors about a meltdown they were desperate to downplay. So they did what networks do best, they tried to outstory him. Producers quietly authorized a follow-up episode titled The Brown Reckoning, in which the wives would address online speculation. They never said his name, but every viewer knew. Kody watched the episode alone in Flagstaff. Friends later told reporters he threw his phone across the room halfway through. The edit framed him as distant, angry, unreachable, exactly what he'd accused them of creating. The next morning he called an old producer and shouted, you're trying to end me." The producer replied softly, "Kody, you ended yourself. We just filmed it." What came next was perhaps his boldest move yet, a plan for his own online series. No TLC contracts, no editors, just Kody raw, a direct-to-camera confessional that would set the record straight. He filmed the pilot in his garage using borrowed lights and a second-hand mic. In the video, he told viewers that the show they loved had become a circus and that he was reclaiming his truth. The response was mixed, some fans sympathized, others saw desperation. Comments flooded in, "Kody needs help, not a YouTube channel." Still, the clip racked up hundreds of thousands of views overnight. TLC's legal team watched in silence as their former star turned their own tactics against them, emotional storytelling, cliffhangers, truth framed as revelation. But beneath the bravado, insiders said he looked tired. The man who once controlled the narrative through charm and bravado was now fighting a losing war against perception. Every new statement contradicted an old one. Every defense confirmed the rumors he wanted buried. One crew member summed it up best: he wasn't taking back control. He was documenting his own undoing in real time. What none of them knew then was that the real explosion, the one that would send shockwaves through both Kody's life and TLC's empire, was still coming. Because Kody Brown wasn't done performing. And the next act would blur the line between redemption and collapse forever. Months passed before TLC dared to shoot again. The network hoped the pause would cool tempers, but when the crew arrived back in Flagstaff, the air felt brittle. They'd been told to keep things light, to focus on updates and moving forward. Everyone understood the subtext: no more explosions. At first, Kody played along. He greeted the crew politely, cracked a few old-school jokes, even asked the sound tech how his kids were. Yet underneath that surface calm, something trembled. The producers noticed his pacing, the way his voice drifted mid-sentence, how his eyes flicked toward the cameras as if checking whether they were still pointed at him. They set up for a simple scene: Kody alone in his backyard, reflecting on change. The sun was lowering behind the trees, turning everything gold. For a few minutes, it felt almost normal. He spoke about family, about rebuilding trust, about being a better version of himself. Then a producer gently asked, "When you watch the last season, what do you see?" The silence that followed stretched long enough for the boom operator to shift his grip. Kody inhaled sharply and said, "I see lies. I see manipulation." His voice cracked. "I see everyone pretending like I didn't give them my whole life." The cameras kept rolling. He stood, walked a few steps toward the fence, and stared out at the empty lot that used to represent his dream of a shared family home. "I built this land for all of us," he muttered. "And now it's just dirt." Producers exchanged looks. No one wanted to interrupt. The audio caught every word as his voice turned into a rasp. "You want me to admit I'm broken? Fine. I am. But you all filmed it, you fed on it." He turned back toward the crew. "Are you happy now?" The director whispered, "Keep rolling." Kody's breathing quickened. He pulled off his mic, stared at it like it was a snake, and threw it into the grass. "I can't do this," he shouted. "You said it would help, but it's just another ambush." He knocked over a lawn chair, then froze, realizing what he'd done. Security didn't rush in this time. Instead, one of the medics from the previous incident quietly approached, speaking softly. Kody didn't resist. He sat down, hands over his face, whispering, "I'm so tired of performing." The cameras, still rolling from a distance, captured the moment with a quiet eeriness: the sound of cicadas, the fading light, a man sobbing into his palms while a producer mouthed, "Cut." Back in the control tent, no one spoke. The director finally said, "That's it. We're done for the day." That night, a message went out to the TLC office: subject experienced emotional distress. Recommend counseling before continuing production. For the second time, filming shut down indefinitely. Only this time, there was no shouting, no glass breaking, just a silence that felt heavier than any outburst. In the days that followed, the crew uploaded the footage, labeling it simply Collapse 2, Backyard. Most refused to watch it again. One assistant editor who did said, "It was the quiet that got me." You could hear the moment the show stopped being a story and turned into a plea. Kody's second breakdown didn't make headlines at first, but inside TLC, everyone knew it changed the rules forever. Reality television had finally caught something too real even for itself. When the cameras finally stopped for good, the silence stretched across every corner of the Sister Wives universe. The production trailers sat empty in the desert sun, the crew's walkie-talkies switched off for the first time in more than a decade. Everyone involved knew it was over, whether TLC would admit it publicly or not. Sister Wives as the world had known it had quietly reached its end. Inside the network's offices, executives debated what to do next. There were talks of rebranding the show, shifting the focus to life after Kody, perhaps following the wives' independent journeys. But the editors, who had spent months watching the collapse unfold frame by frame, warned them. There's no way to rebuild the brand without showing what broke it. Meanwhile, the footage from the backyard breakdown was sealed in a digital vault. It would never be released, not officially. The lawyers called it protected content, the crew called it the moment reality TV crossed a line. Even those who had seen it once refused to re-watch it. The director told a colleague, "It's not a story. It's a man's life falling apart. You can't edit that into entertainment." Robyn withdrew completely from filming. She moved out of the Flagstaff house she and Kody had once shown off as a symbol of their success. When fans asked about her online, she posted one cryptic line, "Sometimes privacy is the only peace left." Christine focused on her new life, occasionally appearing in interviews that felt lighter, freer. Janelle chose silence, declining press but quietly rebuilding her independence. They'd all been through years of scrutiny, but this time, they weren't the spectacle. The man who'd demanded control of their stories had lost control of his own. Kody himself disappeared for several weeks. No posts. No statements. No public appearances. The only trace came from a brief TMZ sighting, him walking alone through an Arizona grocery store, ball cap pulled low, earbuds in. The photo went viral instantly. Commenters called it karma, justice, even tragic. It was all of those things. Eventually, he re-emerged online in a shaky video, shot on his phone. No lighting, no script, no network polish. His voice was subdued. "I've made mistakes," he said. "I've hurt people. I don't know what's next, but maybe that's the point." It was the quietest he'd ever been, and the most human. TLC issued a final statement months later. Production on Sister Wives has concluded. "We thank the family and viewers for over a decade of stories shared." But viewers didn't need a press release to know. The story was finished, not because the cameras stopped rolling, but because there was nothing left to film. The grand experiment, a family, a show, a man who believed he could hold it all together, had collapsed under its own weight. For the crew, the memory lingered. One of the sound engineers kept a still frame from the final night on his desktop, Kody sitting alone under the dim porch light, shoulders slumped, his microphone lying in the dirt beside him. That shot, he later said, wasn't an ending. It was a mirror. For him, for us, for everyone who ever thought control was the same as strength. And maybe that was the truest thing to come from all those years of filming, not the ratings, not the drama, not even the revelations, but the moment when the cameras caught what every story eventually shows, that sometimes the collapse isn't the failure. It's the truth finally showing itself. The last line of the final editor's note said simply, "End of series, no resolution. Only reality."